Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
We've talked before about the grandparent scheme or the grandchild scheme. It targets a grandparent. And the problem with most of these is that if you get ripped off in this way, it's impossible to get your money back because you don't know who to get your money back from. And these people are often in other countries and it's very, very convoluted. But there's an interesting twist on this story that Ed and Donna tipped me off to from the Associated Press. A bank is being sued by an 82-year-old woman who lost $700,000 in the grandparent scam. And here's the issue, is that she's filed a lawsuit. And the question then becomes, is the lawsuit viable? Is there any chance this will succeed? So over the summer, scammers convinced the 82-year-old woman that her granddaughter was in legal trouble and got her to make several bank withdrawals. And then, of course, they wound up with the money. The story's out of Tampa, Florida. But investigators are now looking at Uber and asking Uber to produce records as they investigate the $700,000 theft as part of the grandparent scam, because over the summer, scammers convinced the woman that her granddaughter was in legal trouble and needed her help. And this is a very, very common scam. They told her to withdraw money from her bank and hand the money over to a courier who would then get the money to the right place and would take care of this. And apparently Uber was being used by somebody in here. And now they're hoping that might help them unwind this transaction. Hillsborough County Sheriff's investigators have asked Uber about rideshare pickups at the woman's home between April and August. They want the name of the Uber account holder and credit card information, along with the history of pickups and drop-offs at various locations. This is all according to the Tampa Bay Times. A detective wrote, details will assist with providing information to who purchased the rideshares and where the victim's funds actually went. And that would be something that was recovered from court records. The woman told investigators she did not arrange for the rideshares. And so somebody was using Uber to get to and from her house as a courier. And now, of course, there is some sort of trail that might be able to help the investigators. An Uber spokesperson told the newspaper on Wednesday that the company is in touch with the authorities and is helping with the investigation. Now, it's not clear whether the rides were for couriers to come to the woman's house to get the cash or whether or not something else is going on. The sheriff's office declined to clarify that point because of the ongoing investigation. The woman received the first call from a young woman claiming to be her granddaughter. She said she'd been in a car accident and needed money to get out of jail, according to court records. A man who claimed to be the granddaughter's lawyer then took the phone and spoke to the woman. So what often happens is someone will get a phone call, grandma, grandpa, and if the person says yes, implying that they do in fact have a grandchild, then they will say, I'm in big trouble, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the weird part is that they often won't have any information about the actual grandchild. They're just hoping that they can get to somebody who's caught off guard. And also, some people might actually not keep track of, they got a bunch of grandkids. I know some people who've had a bunch of kids who've had a bunch of grandkids. And so, do you have a granddaughter named Rachel? You might. And sometimes, of course, the grandparent might say, Rachel, is that you? Yes, I'm in jail. I need your help. The people on the phone convinced the woman to make 13 withdrawals from different branches of a bank, ending at $100,000, and then she ran out of money. Now, there are several things going on here, and we've heard stories about banks when they see someone who's older withdrawing huge quantities of cash, will sometimes ask, why are you doing this? I mean, just curious, because there often is a problem there. But as you can imagine, sometimes banks are a little bit leery of getting involved in that respect because, someone might go, it's none of your business why I'm withdrawing my cash. It's my cash. I can do whatever I want with it. So the woman's attorney, who is now the victim of all this, said the scammer's story kept getting more elaborate as the weeks went on. The scammers convinced the woman to tell anyone at the bank who inquired that the money was for home improvements and that her contractors preferred to be paid in cash, which of course would be a real strange situation as an attorney who specializes in consumer protection issues, I would urge you to not pay your contractors in cash. So that's another problem right there. They also told the woman how to wrap the money into bricks and padded envelopes for the courier who'd then pick the money up. The woman's lawyer filed a civil lawsuit in September against the bank, and they alleged negligence for letting the woman make large and unusual withdrawals even after red flags were raised. So that's the interesting thing here, is that people have mentioned Uber, and Uber pops up repeatedly in the headlines, the sub-headlines of these stories, just because, it's a modern thing. People like to talk about Uber. But Uber does not appear to be a party to this case. They would simply be a witness on some level. And so the lawsuit is against the bank, and the lawsuit is alleging negligence. And negligence, generally speaking, is when you owe a duty to someone and you breach that duty. Your breach of that duty can rise to the level of negligence if someone's harmed by the breach of the duty, and so on. And so the best example I can give you is that you have a duty to drive your car in a safe and legal manner. So you get in your car and you drive along, you're driving safely and legally, and you're fine. But if you run a red light, or you go off the road and you're driving through a campground, or you're driving through a playground, or these things, you are breaching your duty to drive your car in a safe manner. And so the question is, what duty does the bank owe to its customers? And do they have a duty to watch the withdrawals you're making and ask themselves, should we intervene on any level here? Should we investigate what's going on? And one of the things we don't know is whether or not they asked the woman, why are you withdrawing the money? Or whether she answered them in any way. Because as noted, the people who are doing this to her, the scammers who are doing this to her, did in fact give her instructions and say, by the way, if anybody asks, here's what you tell them. They said that to her. So, was she asked, and did she tell them? Or was it literally she walked in, withdrew the cash, and, nobody asked, don't tell. So, interestingly, she at one point in time appears to have withdrawn $100,000. $100,000. Now, my understanding of bank transactions is that if you walk up to the counter and say, I want to withdraw $1,000, they'll probably have that behind the counter someplace. If you walk up and say, I wanted to withdraw $10,000, many banks will say, well, I don't have the money right here. I got to go get it. It's someplace in the back. Maybe a vault of some sort. Who knows? I've heard banks have got those. But if you walked in to withdraw $100,000, I'd have to imagine that raises some flags for some people. If for no other reason, then they probably don't have $100,000 in their drawer. The teller. So you go up to the window with a withdrawal slip and go, I want to withdraw $100,000. I don't think they go, oh, okay, just start stacking money on the counter for you. I have a sneaky feeling that they've got to go and speak to somebody and then go wherever they got the big money sitting. In fact, if they have the big money sitting around that's readily available like that. So that, I think, is what they're going to get at, is that, yeah, it's one thing for her to walk in and withdraw $5,000, $10,000, or whatever it might be at the beginning, but when she walks in and withdraws $100,000, doesn't somebody have a duty to look at that and go, what's going on here? That's the question. I'm not saying that there's necessarily going to be any traction with this lawsuit. I don't know. I'd be curious about it. But I think the argument's going to be that in this day and age, when so many people know about this scam, the bank people must know about it. They must know about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if you got internal memos that say, by the way, here's a common scam, and keep your eyes peeled for this, keep on the lookout for it. And so when an 82-year-old customer walks in and says, I want to withdraw $100,000 in cash and, walk out of here with it, you'd think you'd ask a question or two. But then again, if you ask the question, because yeah, I'm paying a contractor for work on my house, and contractor prefers to get paid in cash, that might raise some other flags also. So, getting back to what I always tell you, is that this is an awfully long uphill battle that she's facing here. Whether she gets her money back, I would be inclined to think that the odds are against it. However, all I know is what's in the story here. There might be more we don't know. But the interesting thing about this is that, first of all, they got this lawsuit filed against the bank. That allows them to subpoena records from people like Uber. They might be able to identify some of the perpetrators and then add them into the lawsuit. So it might be that the action against the bank is simply the way of getting the ball rolling. And then as we proceed and we identify the players, we drag them in also and go after them. So the question, of course, is if you caught those people, could you get any money back from them? Hard to say. Whether she gets money from the bank, though, seems to me highly unlikely. But that at least is what they appear to be suing for at this moment in time. So again, as these things proceed, we'll see what happens. But the bigger lesson here is that you really need to watch out for those people in your life. We all have people that we know who are in the age group that needs to worry about these kinds of things. And so if you know somebody who might be a victim of this, should they get that phone call, you need to talk to them and say, by the way, there's this weird thing going around where people will call you pretending to be a grandchild, a grandniece, or grandnephew, or somebody, and they need money and it's an emergency. And you need to understand that emergencies like that don't actually exist in the real world. And so what you're going to need to do is, if anybody ever calls you like that, say, give me your information and let me call you back after I speak to my son, my grandson, my niece, my nephew, or somebody else, and double check this. There is nothing in this world that is so vital that you need to take care of it on the phone call that you got telling you about it. That's just how it is. So you need to talk to people, make sure they understand that. So crazy story out of Florida, but the bank is being sued by an 82-year-old woman who lost $700,000 in the grandparent scam. But of course, they might be able to recover some information from Uber as well. We'll see what happens. The Associated Press published it. Ed and Donna sent it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Of all emotions, respect alone stands, not for sale. Do good. Revenges be futile. Save your integrity. Let love prevail.